For 40 years, he was an invisible janitor. But in the shadows, he was a ghost, a legendary special operator erased from history. When a Navy SEAL spoke his code name out loud, a nation's secret was exposed. Marcus Johnson woke at precisely 5:30 a.m., a habit forged in the crucible of a life he was forced to forget. At 67, his body, though weary, still answered the silent, internal bugle call. His small apartment in East Baltimore was a testament to a lifetime of discipline, everything in its place, nothing wasted. His morning routine was a ritual of quiet humility, push-ups on the worn linoleum floor, plain oatmeal, black coffee in a chipped mug. By 6:15, he was walking the 12 blocks to the Westridge manufacturing plant, where he had worked as a janitor for nearly 15 years. Invisibility had become his armor. The plant produced precision parts, and a new defense contract had the management, particularly a man named Harrison Reed, puffing their chests. For Marcus, it just meant more floors to mop. Reed, a man of 42 who wore his Ivy League education like a medal, treated Marcus with a casual disdain reserved for the hired help. It wasn't overt, but it was always there, in the way he'd issue commands without making eye contact, in the impatient sighs, in the clear, unspoken belief that a man who mopped floors was a lower form of life. Johnson, Reed would command, "There's a mess on the production floor. Take care of it." It was never a request. This particular day was different. The plant was hosting its annual military appreciation ceremony. For Reed, it was a chance to schmooze with politicians and high-ranking officers. For Marcus, it was a minefield of memories he desperately wanted to avoid. Johnson, Reed had instructed earlier, "I want every floor spotless. And during the ceremony, you will work the West Wing. Keep out of sight of our guests." The message was clear: the old janitor was not part of the patriotic image Westridge wanted to project. As the ceremony began in the main auditorium, Marcus was dutifully mopping a distant hallway. He could hear the muffled sound of speeches, the polite applause. He had no intention of going anywhere near it. But then Darius, a young, earnest production line worker who always treated Marcus with genuine kindness, found him. "Marcus, you gotta come see this," Darius said, his eyes wide with excitement. "The speaker is Commander Wilson, a real-life Navy SEAL. He's talking about special ops history. I thought you'd be interested." Marcus politely declined, but Darius insisted. "Just for a few minutes. Reed's too busy kissing up to the brass to notice." Reluctantly, Marcus followed, standing in the shadows at the very back of the packed auditorium, his mop and bucket his props of invisibility. Commander James Wilson stood at the podium, his dress uniform immaculate, his voice carrying a quiet authority that cut through the room. "Today," Wilson began, "I want to share a piece of military history that has remained classified for too long. In the shadowy world of special operations, there are men whose names never appear in history books, whose medals are never pinned to their chests. They are ghosts, sent to do the impossible, then erased to protect the narrative." A prickle of profound unease ran down Marcus's spine. He felt a sudden, irrational urge to flee. Wilson continued, his gaze sweeping the room. One such operator, a man from a coal mining town in Pennsylvania with no connections, no pedigree, became the most effective solo operative in the history of the program. He moved through hostile territory like he was made of smoke. His code name was Nighthawk. The mop handle slipped from Marcus's suddenly numb fingers, clattering loudly against the polished floor. The sound was a gunshot in the quiet room. Several heads turned. Commander Wilson's eyes, sharp and intelligent, locked onto his. Wilson paused, then raised his voice, a clear, ringing declaration that shattered 40 years of silence. "This operator exists in the stories whispered by the men he saved, men like my own father. But he also exists in this room." He raised his arm, pointing directly at the old janitor standing in the shadows by the exit. "He is standing right there. His name is Marcus Johnson. He is Nighthawk." The world exploded in a flash of camera bulbs and a roar of confused shouts. Marcus stood frozen, the armor of his invisibility shattered, his carefully constructed quiet life burning to the ground around him. The auditorium erupted into chaos. Reporters, sensing the story of a lifetime, surged toward the back, their cameras and microphones a ravenous tide. Plant manager Harrison Reed pushed through the crowd, his face a mask of apoplectic confusion. "Johnson! What the hell is going on?" But Marcus didn't hear him. He was trapped, a ghost suddenly floodlit, his instincts screaming at him to disappear. It was Darius who saved him. The young man grabbed his arm, "This way, Marcus," and pulled him toward a service exit, shielding him from the barrage of questions. They slipped out into the cool afternoon air just as the official counterattack began. Inside the auditorium, two men in dark, severe suits were already on stage, escorting a protesting Commander Wilson away from the podium. Within minutes, the story was on every news network, but with a powerful, official spin. "The Pentagon has issued a swift and categorical denial," a news anchor reported, her voice grave. "They state that while a Marcus Johnson did serve, his was a brief, administrative role. They claim Commander Wilson, a decorated officer, may be suffering from combat-related stress and that his claims are, quote, unfounded and fantastical." The narrative was being set, Wilson was unstable, and Marcus was a delusional old man. The systemic erasure that had defined his life was now happening in real time, on a national stage. When Marcus finally reached his small, quiet apartment, he knew something was wrong before he even opened the door. The air was different. Inside, everything looked normal, but it was the perfect, sterile neatness of a room that had been professionally searched. He walked to the kitchen. The refrigerator was back in its place, but it was a quarter of an inch off its usual mark on the floor. His heart sank. He slid it away. The hidden panel was still there, but behind it, the cavity was empty. The metal box, his only proof, his unofficial history filled with mission logs, photographs, a single bullet casing from his first operation, was gone. They hadn't just denied his existence, they had surgically removed it. It was a checkmate. He had no proof, no corroboration. He was just a janitor with a wild story. He sank onto his worn sofa, the weight of 67 years, of 40 years of silence, pressing down on him, threatening to crush him. He was well and truly alone. Then, his landline rang, a shrill, jarring sound in the quiet room. The number was blocked. He answered cautiously. "Nighthawk," a familiar, gravelly voice said. "They took the bait. Now they think you're unarmed." It was Elijah Whisper Washington, his former teammate, the only other man who knew about the real insurance policy. "They got the box, Elijah," Marcus said, his voice heavy with defeat. "They got the decoy box, Marcus," Elijah corrected him, a hint of a wry smile in his voice. "The real files are safe. I got the alert from your home security tripwire the second they entered. They're sloppy. Arrogant. They think they've won." A pause. "This has gone on long enough, brother. It's time. You ready to go to war?" In that moment, the despair in Marcus's chest was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. For 40 years, he had honored their silence, had accepted his erasure. But they had come into his home. They had tried to make him a liar. They had underestimated him one last time. "Yes," Marcus said, his voice no longer that of a janitor, but of a commander. "It's time." The safe house in West Baltimore was a ghost from their shared past, a narrow row house whose peeling paint belied the fortress within. Elijah Washington, codenamed Whisper for his uncanny ability to extract information, opened the door. The two men, both nearing 70, clasped hands, a lifetime of shared secrets passing between them in a single, silent gesture. "I always knew this day would come," Elijah said, pouring 2 glasses of expensive bourbon. His post-military life in investment banking had been successful, but the skills were the same, reading people, calculating risk, staying one step ahead. The elites could never stand that a couple of working-class boys were better at their job than they were. Their bond wasn't just about shared missions, it was about a shared struggle. They were not products of West Point or a military dynasty. Marcus was the son of a Pennsylvania coal miner, Elijah the son of a Detroit auto worker. They had entered the special operations world through a side door, their raw talent an inconvenient truth for the established, blue blood officer corps. "They're trying to frame me as a delusional old man," Marcus said, recounting the news reports and the theft of his decoy box. "Of course, they are," Elijah snorted. "It's the classist's oldest trick. If you can't beat a man on merit, you attack his credibility, his sanity. You frame him as an upstart who doesn't know his place." The conversation inevitably turned to their ultimate antagonist, General Raymond Whitfield. He was the epitome of the military aristocracy they had fought against, a third-generation general who saw men like them as expendable tools, instruments to be used for his own glory. The memory was sharp and bitter. A mission in Laos, 1979. Their unit was ambushed, pinned down by heavy fire. Whitfield, then a young, arrogant captain, had frozen, his command collapsing into chaos. It was Marcus who had taken charge, organizing a counterattack, single-handedly neutralizing 2 enemy machine gun nests and carrying 3 wounded men, including Whitfield, to safety. The after-action report, signed by Whitfield, praised his own, calm leadership under fire. Marcus and Elijah's names were never mentioned. "That was the day," Elijah said, swirling the bourbon in his glass, "that we decided to create the insurance policy." The flashback was a pact made in the shadows. After the Laos mission, Marcus, Elijah, and a handful of other outsider operators had gathered. They knew their contributions would always be erased or stolen by the likes of Whitfield. They trusted each other, but they did not trust the system. So they created their own record. For every mission, they made copies of the real logs, the unredacted radio transcripts, the pre-mission intelligence, and the post-mission debriefs. They compiled a complete, undeniable shadow history of their service, a trove of evidence hidden away for a day just like this. "Whitfield thinks he's fighting alone," discredited janitor, Marcus said, a cold fire in his ice-blue eyes. "He has no idea he's about to fight his own history." Their plan solidified quickly, a campaign strategy session between 2 old masters. It would have 3 phases. First, a psychological probe, a controlled leak to show their hand and make the enemy nervous. Second, force a public confrontation on neutral ground, a place where the truth could not be buried by classified stamps, a congressional hearing. And third, in that public arena, deploy the insurance policy for a final, decisive checkmate. "Whitfield built his entire career on our backs," Elijah said, raising his glass. "It's time we presented him with the bill." General Raymond Whitfield mobilized the full force of the Pentagon's public relations machinery. The strategy was a classic character assassination, subtly laced with class prejudice. Unnamed sources began leaking information to friendly media outlets. They painted Marcus as a disgruntled former clerk with a history of embellishing his service. They highlighted his working-class background, contrasting it with Whitfield's distinguished family history of military leadership. The narrative they pushed was clear: how could a man who now mops floors possibly be a legendary hero? It was a desperate attempt to make the truth seem too improbable to believe. From their Baltimore safe house, Marcus and Elijah watched Whitfield's smear campaign unfold. "He's overplaying his hand," Marcus observed calmly. "His arrogance is making him predictable." It was time for their first move, a psychological shot across the bow. They chose their weapon carefully. It wasn't a mission log or a combat report. It was a single, grainy photograph from a training exercise at Fort Bragg in 1978. The photo depicted a capture the flag style command exercise. A young, confident Captain Whitfield, representing the elite officer team, was shown on his knees in the mud, a flag tied to his arm having just been snatched away. Standing over him, looking not triumphant but almost bored, was a young, enlisted Marcus Johnson, who had been leading the aggressor squad of non-commissioned soldiers. The photo captured a moment of pure, unadulterated humiliation for the young aristocrat at the hands of the working-class grunt. It had been a legendary moment whispered about in the barracks for years, a story Whitfield had spent his career trying to bury. Elijah, using his knowledge of the digital world, leaked the photo not to a major news network, but to a popular, independent military blog known for its irreverent, anti-establishment stance. He attached a simple, anonymous caption, "Sometimes, raw talent beats a fancy degree. Fort Bragg, 1978. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. The photo went viral within the vast online community of active duty soldiers and veterans. It was shared thousands of times. The comments were a torrent of support for the unknown enlisted man and ridicule for the high and mighty officer. It perfectly tapped into the long-standing cultural divide between the military's grunts and its officer class. The mainstream media picked it up within hours. News anchors who had been questioning Marcus's story were now showing the photo, asking new, pointed questions. "General Whitfield, is this you in the photograph? Can you explain the context of this training exercise?" Whitfield was caught completely off guard. He was forced to issue a statement, dismissing it as a meaningless moment from a training exercise 40 years ago. But his dismissive, arrogant tone backfired. He looked like a bully who couldn't stand being shown up. The psychological operation was a success. Marcus and Elijah hadn't revealed any classified information. They had simply attacked Whitfield's most prized asset, his image of effortless superiority. For the first time, the public saw a crack in the general's armor. The narrative was beginning to shift. The unreliable janitor now had a story that people were starting to believe. Whitfield, in his panic, doubled down on his denials, appearing increasingly defensive and rattled. The stage was being set for the final confrontation. The viral photograph and the growing public outcry forced the government's hand. The House Armed Services Committee announced a special, televised public hearing to investigate the claims and restore faith in the integrity of military honors. It was exactly the stage Marcus and Elijah had maneuvered for. General Whitfield, confident he could use the formal setting to destroy Marcus's credibility with official denials and military jargon, agreed to testify. It was a fatal miscalculation. The hearing room was packed. On one side sat General Whitfield, flanked by a team of Pentagon lawyers, the very picture of institutional power. On the other side sat Marcus Johnson, alone, in a simple, dark suit. He looked, to the untrained eye, like what he was, an old janitor, out of his depth. The hearing began as Whitfield had planned. He and a series of hand-picked retired officers testified to the impossibility of Marcus's claims. They spoke of protocols, of classified records, of the chain of command. They painted a picture of Marcus as a man confused by time, mistaking administrative duties for battlefield heroics. "Mr. Johnson was a clerk," one general stated flatly. "A good one, I'm sure. But he was not an operator. The idea is, frankly, absurd." When it was Marcus's turn, he did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He spoke calmly, answering the hostile questions with a quiet dignity. "Senator," he said, addressing the committee chair, "you have heard testimony that I do not exist in the records. On this, we agree. My complaint is why I do not exist." He recounted a single mission, the Laos operation where he had saved a young lieutenant named Thomas Parker. He described it in sparse, factual detail. General Whitfield was given the chance for rebuttal. He laughed, a short, dismissive bark. "This is a touching piece of fiction. It would make a fine movie. But it is not history. There is not a single piece of official evidence to corroborate this fantasy." "You are correct, General," Marcus said, his voice still quiet. "There is no official evidence." He looked toward the back of the room, at Elijah, who gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. But there is unofficial evidence. At that moment, every screen in the hearing room, including the large displays behind the senators, flickered to life. An email had just been sent to every member of the press gallery and every congressional aide from a secure, untraceable server. The subject line read, "The Nighthawk Files." The first file to play was an audio recording. The voice was younger, but unmistakably General Whitfield's. It was a debriefing from the Laos mission. Captain Reynolds did exemplarily, Whitfield's voice echoed through the silent room. He carried Parker 3 miles to the evac point. Then, another voice, a junior officer, could be heard. "Sir, with respect, it was the specialist, Johnson, who carried him." Reynolds was providing cover fire. There was a pause, then Whitfield's voice, cold and sharp. "Your report will reflect that Captain Reynolds was the hero of the day. The specialist did his job. That's all. Are we clear?" The hearing room was thunderstruck. General Whitfield's face went ashen. He lunged for his microphone. "This is doctored. It's an illegal recording. It's inadmissible." But it was too late. The files kept coming. A photo of Whitfield personally handing a commendation to another officer for a mission Marcus had led. A scanned document, signed by Whitfield, redirecting a medal recommendation for Marcus to one of his own academy classmates. The final piece of evidence was a video file. It was from the disastrous Baghdad mission. The footage was from a helmet cam, chaotic and grainy. But the audio was crystal clear. "Command, this is Nighthawk. My position is compromised. Requesting immediate extraction, I have 2 wounded." Whitfield's voice came back over the radio, cold and final. "Negative, Nighthawk. Extraction is not viable. You are on your own. Complete the mission or, you know the alternative. Command out." The video showed Marcus, under fire, making the impossible choice to abandon the primary objective to save his wounded men. The final frame was him, dragging 2 soldiers toward a sliver of cover, as the sound of overwhelming enemy forces closed in. The hearing room was in an uproar. General Whitfield sat frozen, his career, his reputation, his entire life of stolen honor, disintegrating before the eyes of the world. Marcus Johnson didn't say another word. He had presented his evidence. The truth, after 40 years in the dark, had finally had its say. The checkmate was complete. The fallout from the hearing was seismic. General Raymond Whitfield was immediately suspended, and a sweeping investigation by the Department of Justice was launched, leading to his dishonorable discharge and prosecution for perjury and obstruction. His carefully constructed legacy was revealed as a house of cards, built on the stolen valor of men he deemed beneath him. The Pentagon, facing a public relations catastrophe, was forced to act. They established a new commission, the Historical Accuracy and Recognition Task Force, with a mandate to review historical service records for evidence of systemic discrimination, not just based on race, but on class and background. 1 month later, Marcus Johnson stood at attention in the Oval Office. The President of the United States, in a solemn ceremony, draped the Medal of Honor around his neck. The citation, read aloud to the nation, detailed decades of heroism that had been deliberately erased. Commander Wilson and Elijah Washington stood by, their faces filled with a quiet, profound pride. But for Marcus, the real victory came not in the ceremony, but in the work that followed. He declined the lucrative book deals and movie offers. Instead, with the substantial back pay and damages he received, he established the Nighthawk Foundation. Its mission was simple: to provide mentorship and financial support to gifted young soldiers from working-class and underprivileged backgrounds, helping them navigate the often political landscape of military advancement. He wanted to ensure that no future soldier's talent would be dismissed because of their last name or the town they came from. The story concluded not in the White House, but in a simple community gym in Baltimore. Marcus, dressed in a plain gray sweatshirt, was coaching a young, determined boxer from a poor neighborhood. The kid had talent and fire, but lacked discipline. "Power is nothing without control," "Son," Marcus said, adjusting the boy's stance. "The real fight isn't in the ring. It's in here." He tapped his own temple. "It's about knowing who you are, and never letting anyone else tell you you're not worthy of the honor you've earned." He looked at the young man, at the raw potential in his eyes, and saw a reflection of himself, a lifetime ago. The Invisible Man had finally stepped into the light, not just to reclaim his own story, but to ensure that the next generation of forgotten heroes would never have to be forgotten at all. This story is a powerful reminder that heroism is not defined by medals or recognition, but by character and sacrifice. It's a testament to the fact that the truth, no matter how long it is buried, can and must be brought to light. Do you believe a person's background should ever affect the recognition they receive? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this story of justice and vindication moved you, please like this video, subscribe for more powerful stories, and share it with someone who believes in fighting for the truth. And comment "truth" to show your support.